again, thank you very much for joining me today. And I'm so sorry about all the chaos and being late. But as I was saying before, I don't know if you could hear me or not, but I had some problems. I was going to make a live stream in another room, but that didn't work very well. So I had to move all the stuff back into this room, and then just absolute chaos. Hopefully the live stream will be better than what I'm doing today. So I was thinking we could start with something that is kind of opposite to self-acceptance, which is self-criticism. So basically, my first question towards you would be, how does self-criticism manifest in your life? How do you do it? What sort of thoughts, what sort of feelings and emotions do you associate with self-criticism? Because I think self-criticism is an important part and very evident part of a human existence in general. We all criticize ourselves to some extent. So again, my first question would be, how does this self-criticism manifest in your life? In what sort of situations do you criticize yourself, right? What sort of thoughts, what sort of feelings do you associate with self-criticism? And by the way, if there are still any audio problems or video problems, just let me know. So while I'm waiting for your responses, because as in previous live streams, I think it's super important if you guys get engaged, so that you can get something from this workshops, from this live streams. And you know, I really want to give you this opportunity to participate in the discussion. So when you share your thoughts, when you share things, how things are on your end, from your experience, from your perspective, that will be super helpful, because then we can build a whole dialogue, right? And then we can get some outcomes. So yes, hello Farah, hello Kyriakos, hopefully I pronounced that right. So guilt, right? Self-criticism associated with guilt. I can relate to this as well, because obviously when we criticize ourselves or when we criticize other people, it means that we've done something wrong, right? So to criticize ourselves, it means that we've done something and we deserve punishment in a way, right? If we made a mistake that's wrong, or if we did something in our life that maybe other people or our values don't agree with, that's where the self-criticism comes in. So I'm wondering, what else could you share on this subject, on the subject of self-criticism? Doesn't self-criticism has negative connotation? Yes, right, exactly. That's why I started from this subject, because it's quite opposite to self-acceptance. But in my opinion, in order to develop self-acceptance, in order to improve self-acceptance, for whatever reason, and I'm gonna try to uncover these reasons in a minute, we need to be able to dismantle self-criticism first. Because self-criticism, if we are critical of ourselves, obviously that's a manifestation of not being acceptant of ourselves, right? So guilty, sadness, very, very important emotion, sadness. But is the sadness coming from self-criticism, or is it our reaction towards self-criticism? I think it's an important question we can ask ourselves. The same with guilt. Is it coming from the part of ourselves that criticizes ourselves, or is it our reaction to self-criticism? So here we can see how we can kind of start developing a sort of meta-awareness and self-awareness of the internal dialogue that often runs through our heads. And I don't think that self-criticism is generally very, very useful. There is a purpose to it, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't be doing it. And in my opinion, I think that self-criticism is this manifestation of our kind of striving towards an ideal. So we have some ideal, we have a value, we have some sort of idea of what sort of person we want to be. What sort of person would it be right to be? And as Trement says, it manifests in the form of condemning myself for what I haven't accomplished. So that means that you had an idea of what you want to accomplish, right? But then you didn't do it. So you punish yourself with self-criticism. So we can see here that two functions to self-criticism. One is, and as I said, is to kind of create this pressure on yourself that you need to strive towards some ideal, right? Appears that way at least. And the other one is to punish yourself for not being able to be that ideal, to be in that ideal, to be that ideal self in a way. So if the purpose is only to punish ourselves or to push us towards some ideal, I can't feel like there's much value in self-criticism in the first place. And I remember years ago, when I was actually in therapy. That was around 8-9 years ago, and I had a very strong inner critic, very strong inner criticisms going on all the time. Anytime I made a mistake, boom, what are you doing? You don't deserve it. You're stupid, or whatever else. And that was kind of, for me at that time, that was obvious that I need to keep doing it, right? If I want to improve, I need to listen to that inner critic, right? I need to go along with all these so-called descriptions and pressure, so I can keep striving towards that ideal, so I can keep striving and stop doing stupid mistakes, right? And I thought that, the alternative, like, what would be the alternative to it? Like, how else would I learn from my mistakes? And that was, in a sense, delusional. And I think that many people actually can relate to it, because you can hear how other people talk to each other, how other people react. That's what other people are doing, and that's what I need to do in order to improve myself, in order to learn from my mistakes. But as I found out through development, through that therapy, through learning more about myself, there is an alternative. Like, we don't need to criticize ourselves. So my question was at that time, so how else do I improve? How else do I learn from my mistakes, right? If I don't criticize myself, how else do I know that I've made a mistake or that I did something wrong, right? And that's how we're getting into the subject of self-acceptance. So the thing is that with the inner, just to quickly read the comment, with criticism, no criticism serves as an instrument for evaluation of performance. Right, so that is the purpose of the inner critic. It evaluates, it judges you, right? Did you do something right? Did you do something wrong? But I think that the thing with self-criticism, or with any kind of criticism, whether it's towards yourself or towards other people, it's a form of evaluation, it's a form of judgment. In many ways it could manifest itself. But the thing is that self-criticism is very limited. Criticism in general, it's very limited. It's very dualistic. So it's either right, either wrong. Something is either good or either bad. But the thing is that the human nature is way more complex than this dualistic right-wrong, right? / white or black, right? We are way more complex beings. Our behaviors are way more complex than this dualistic perspective that the criticism makes us to adopt. It makes us to believe in, really, right? And then react and have all these feelings and have all these emotions like guilt or sadness or anger or anxiety even. So, and as I'm saying, like, the limitation of the criticism is kind of obvious once you start realizing the complexity of your own being and the complexity of the whole reality, the whole world itself, and behaviors and the mind itself. Because as our nature evolves, as we evolve as human beings, or as we generally are, we are way more complex than this black and white thinking. For example, when we do a mistake, it might seem like a mistake from one perspective, but is it really? What if we are working towards some specific goal? What if we are learning a particular skill, right? Okay, we made a mistake. Maybe we did, maybe we didn't. But if we are striving towards this specific goal, does it really matter? Does it really matter to us to evaluate this performance and how we are doing? Maybe on some level, to some extent, because obviously some people would say, like, how else would I know that I've made a mistake, or whether I'm improving, or whether I'm moving forward? The thing is that you will know that you're moving forward as you're getting the feedback from the environment. So as you observe the outcomes of your actions, that's how you know which direction you are going and whether you are doing something right or whether you are doing something wrong. But essentially, it's all about this, whole complexity of the human being and our behaviors in general. So when we criticize ourselves, when we say like, oh, I don't deserve this, or I'm really stupid, or maybe I don't have, I'm not very good at this, I'm not very good at that, this life is pointless, right? All the self-criticism, they narrow our perception down, they narrow our perspective down to this little reality tunnel, and that's how we get locked into this mental state associated with criticism, which are often heavily saturated with guilt or sadness or anxiety or anger, whatever it is for us personally. And then obviously the consequences of all that is that we don't want to progress anymore. Like, I don't want someone telling me like, oh, you are doing this wrong and wrong. Like, if someone keeps telling me that, I lose my motivation completely. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to know. I mean, I want to know, but I don't need to listen to it. I don't need to be punished for it, because I see through my actions whether I'm doing something wrong, whether I'm learning, whether I'm moving forward. So evaluations, I'm not on a stage performing all the time, right? So I just can't see how self-criticism could be beneficial in the longer term. But obviously it's a part of our nature, and I don't think it's possible to completely remove that critical voice of our mind. And there is some value, there is some function to it. The problem starts while we completely identify with this voice and we can't see anything outside of it. As I was saying before, it narrows our perception down, and all we can see is this critical voice, and we magnify the faults and mistakes that we are doing. So it narrows our perception of that. And the remedy to that would be to adopt this more holistic meta perspective, where we see that there is a purpose to everything, and that you are more complex than this one little behavior, or that one little mistake that you've done. To improve, you need to discern between self-illusion and realistic objective result. It's not only black and white. Right, but you don't really need self-criticism for that. You don't need to punish yourself. You don't need to tell yourself, I'm stupid, which is an absolutely generalized adjective that doesn't tell you anything. Like, what does it tell you? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because when you make a mistake within that specific context. And it doesn't describe your whole personality. It's not your whole self, right? It's just limited to this specific context. But when we start listening to that self-criticism, we completely go into this context. We can't see anything else. Our vision narrows down, and all we can see is all these adjectives that we are telling ourselves. When it hurts, you know you have made a mistake. Right. But then again, it depends on the context and how you evaluate it. Obviously, it's gonna hurt. It's part of being a human in the first place. So when we do something wrong, when we go in the wrong direction in our lives, how else would we know whether something is right or wrong for us? So we need these feelings. Feelings actually are super useful because they tell us about the situation that we are in. They have this evaluating function. So actually, by the way, as we are on the subject of feelings, we have our feelings, so there's no need for self-criticism because feelings already have this evaluating function in a sense. So again, I think it's all about the balance. So depending on the context, we'll use different functions. Where does it come from? Calling me stupid instead of giving me actual advice. Right. So I don't know how to interpret your comments. I'll interpret it from my perspective. So the way I understand it is you are asking how to inquire where the self-criticism is coming from, which will be a really good question and really good investigation. Why do you need to criticize yourself and where is it coming from? Because very often it's simply a learned behavior. It's something our parents taught us to do, or maybe society that we grew up in, right? So the way our parents treated us, that's how we will treat ourselves in the future. So we kind of internalize the external dialogue, or how our parents were talking to us. We internalize it and we assume it's our own dialogue. That's exactly what I meant. Okay, cool. I wasn't sure. So I think I kind of exhausted the subject on self-criticism, at least for now. Of course, there's probably much more to say, but I just wanted to give a brief overview because I think it's important to consider when we want to work on improving self-acceptance. And I think that the question we need to ask ourselves first is, why do we need self-acceptance in the first place? Because I think that very often self-acceptance could be associated with kind of passivity. So, all right, we have a bad habit. Let's say I'm taking drugs, but I accept myself. So I'm just gonna keep doing the wrong thing, right? I think that would be the general kind of common sense idea of self-acceptance. We have bad habits, just go along with a bad habit, right? And just keep doing it, regardless if it damages our health or not. Or we have some toxic relationships in our lives. I accept everything. I accept myself. I'm just gonna go along with it. But actually, in a bigger, from the bigger perspective, from the wider perspective, self-acceptance is not so much about accepting everything about ourselves and just letting it be, basically, and just not doing anything about it. Acceptance for me, as I understand it, in terms of humanistic psychology, so people like Abraham Maslow or Carl Rogers, all these guys who are about the self-actualization, self-acceptance in this context is about being honest with yourself and owning your behaviors, your feelings, your personality, your likes, your dislikes. So it's not about denying the parts of yourself, but about accepting them. So when you accept the part of yourself, only then you can change. So, for example, if you push a certain part of your personality to your unconscious, to your shadow self, right? You disown it. You said, okay, I'm not this. For example, I'm not rude. I'm not a mean person, right? I identify only with the nice things. I'm only a nice and polite person, but I'm not rude. So in this context, you disown that part of you. You don't accept it. You don't want to be rude. You're not mean. But from the Jungian perspective, we know that the shadow will start coming up, and you probably, most likely, you're going to be very mean in certain situations. So self-acceptance in this case, it's not about accepting that you are mean and going around being mean to people, right? But accepting that, okay, I am a mean person. I can see that. I can see in what sort of situations I can't be mean. And only then we can do something about it. Only in this situation. So self-acceptance in this context is about being absolutely honest with ourselves and taking responsibility for every single thing, every single behavior, every single characteristics that we might be having. So you can see here how it's opposite to self-criticism, because it allows us to expand our self-definition. It allows us to expand our self-concept. So we are not this, kind of being locked in this black and white categories. I am this, I'm not that. But it's like, yes, I am this, I am this, I am this. I'm everything in a sense. Not in a narcissistic sense to take pride in, but you recognize that you have all these potentialities that allow you to act in different contexts. So self-acceptance in this case is taking ownership of all that you are or that you could be. Not necessarily going along or not trying to change or not trying to improve or learn, but more about being honest with yourself and accepting that, yeah, I am this person. That's it, right? And in the last part, I'm going to explain what magical powers there will be. But before we go, I wanted to finish on this bit of self-acceptance. And I was actually wondering, how would you rate your own self-acceptance? So what sort of things do you accept within yourself? And what sort of things maybe you struggle with accepting with? So is there anything you don't accept with yourself, and why? Is there anything that you would like to accept but something stops you? Really looking forward to your thoughts. So we'll go from there. And then after that bit, maybe we can finish off the Livestream with the theory of paradoxical theory of change. So how we can use self-acceptance for growth. So I'm just gonna read some comments before you answer the question about what stops you maybe from developing self-acceptance, and is there anything within you that you'd like to accept but something stops you? Or maybe is there something that you don't accept and you don't want to look at? Really looking forward to hearing you. I feel like the negative internal monologue comes from limiting beliefs in the past regarding your own capabilities, strengths, weaknesses regarding a particular area. Right, so yeah, self-criticism, as I was saying, it could be seen as a learned behavior, so something that we internalized. And obviously a learned behavior will have all these different associated beliefs that drive it, in a sense, even if it's just on a thought level. Yeah. Coming too late in time, really accepted that a long time ago. For example, knowing the morning bad mood to be in better mood. So, Fata Morgana, do you mean that you get up in a bad mood, so you get morning bad mood, but you don't accept the fact that you're having a bad mood, so you prefer to have a better mood? On ability to view objectively. Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm not sure if anyone can 100%. That is a really tough one because, yeah. So it's like struggling to accept our own limitations in a sense. And we are limited to some extent. We can't, I can't go out of my brain and see the world objectively. That is a huge limit, so. 5 out of 10 on self-acceptance. Acknowledge my shadow self. Not strong enough yet to resist being enveloped by it in the moment. Right. So we all have to some extent things about ourselves that we don't accept, and this part of ourselves might provoke strong feelings. They might provoke certain emotions. They might trigger different beliefs and self-criticism, actually. So when the part that we disown or we struggle to accept, when we disown it, we basically fuel the self-criticism. So in a way, it's like when things that you don't like happen, you basically have a choice. You can go along with self-criticism and punishment and say and evaluate the whole situation and tell yourself how wrong it is, how wrong you are, how bad it is, and struggle with yourself to change it. Or you can go with this idea of self-acceptance and flow, essentially flow. Okay, so something bad happened, something that I didn't enjoy about happened, but it's just one situation. It's not the whole life. We humans have this tendency to generalize to the wider context, but actually when something we don't like happens, it's usually within specific context, and it tells us something about ourselves in that specific context, not as a whole person. So I think that, in a sense, building self-acceptance starts with accepting our feelings. So, as Fata Morgana said, for example, accepting that there will be a bad mood, right? Some people wake up in a bad mood, and and that's fine, right? Or that maybe, we have these limits. We can't be fully objective, for example, right? So you all have these different vulnerabilities that provoke different feelings. Thank you, Alpha Dog. So in my opinion, to build this self-acceptance, we need to get in touch with these feelings and accept them. And then understand what sort of triggers they are, why we are being triggered, why these feelings arise. Because these feelings usually, especially the so-called negative feelings, as we could call them, like sadness or anger or something painful or guilt, they usually arise as a result of struggling or kind of being in conflict with ourselves. I'm not saying that, the life is all great and it doesn't provoke any negative feelings, because it does. It's part of human existence, right? We lose something or someone, we're gonna get sad. Something happens that, I don't know, we get stuck in the traffic while being late. Yes, we're gonna get angry. So there are different situations that will provoke different feelings. But what about our feelings towards ourselves, right? That's something that I think we need to look at. For example, do you feel ashamed of yourself? Shame is a super strong emotion that often prevents us from developing the self-acceptance, and actually gives us a lot of information on what sort of things we don't accept within ourselves, what sort of things we feel weak with. So I think the first emotion to start, or a feeling to start paying attention to, is this shame or embarrassment, and in what sort of situations we might feel ashamed or inferior or vulnerable, right? That's going to tell us about the parts that we disown, that we don't want to look at in terms of self-acceptance. So it's developing the self-acceptance is kind of all about improving self-knowledge, right? Developing self-awareness and knowing more and more about ourselves. So inquiring into different feelings, different emotions that might tell us about parts that we disown. So when something happens, when we are presented with a situation that brings in that part of ourselves that we don't accept and we don't want to look at, it usually starts bringing up this shame or insecurity. And that's very often when the self-criticism starts to kick in. That's where we start punishing ourselves. Like, why did I act that way in that situation? And then we on the roll of self-criticism. And we even intensify these feelings with all these critical voices we might be feeling. think I wasn't well socialized as a kid, and I would like to embrace that weirdness of me, but I have trouble with accepting that. So what's stopping you from accepting that? Is it other people? My guess would be. Is it self-criticism that goes inside your mind, telling you that you are weird or there's something wrong with you? Because that's usually how we struggle with accepting things. We either internalize, for example, our parents' voice, so I am this, I am that, I'm stupid, or simply the attitude, or how we make sense of the attitude, or we internalize the social voices, so-called social voices, social judgments, and how we are being treated by other people as children. How do you do post-work on embarrassing situations? Like, do you write them down or relive them with imaginary, etc.? I think that would be entirely up to you, and see what works for you. So some people are more visual and they want to be more kind of experiential and relive the experience. Some other people, writing would be really good. And for some other people, it could be, enough just to talk to other people and make sense of that experience. So basically what you want is, you want to stay with an embarrassment, think about that situation, right? Stay with an embarrassment and have a really good think about where this embarrassment is coming from, right? And then once you're in touch, once you are able to hold your awareness, so kind of detached awareness in a sense, and the experience of embarrassment and that situation that happened, and start making sense of it, you're going to find a way out. You're going to find an alternative. But the key is to hold all these elements. We often, when we start feeling embarrassed, for example, we often go along with an embarrassment and kind of sink into the experience. But the key is to step out of it, but at the same time, without pushing the embarrassment away, without dissociating, without detaching ourselves completely, but kind of step outside and look at it so you can feel it, but at the same time recognize that you're not all there is. And in some situations it will be that you will start making more and more sense of the situation, so where this embarrassment is coming from, and is there an alternative way of reacting. In other situations, the embarrassment might be so old, so ancient, it might be coming from infancy, for example, where all you can do is just slowly start retraining yourself to, how to put it, to start feeling differently. So the way to do it is basically, you feel that embarrassment, and then in real time, when you are in the situations that provoke embarrassment, just stay with embarrassment and again step out of it. So you stay with embarrassment, you stay with that part of you, but at the same time you detach yourself a little bit from this feeling, so that you have a wider perspective on how to act in the situation that is not solely related to embarrassment. Because when you feel embarrassed and when you sink into the embarrassment, you're gonna make a fool of yourself. Because as I said before, once we sink into particular mental state, be it in a criticism or feeling or emotions, it widens our vision, it narrows our vision, narrows our perspective down, so we have less and less choices. Stepping out of it, you have more choices. Yeah, embarrassment is just one of the options. Yeah, that's a good comment from Ibrahim. Be careful not to accept what is not there, like insecurities or something someone said about you, like parents' voice. Right. So you need to, again, comes back to kind of questioning where our kind of voice is coming from. So it's all about where the self-criticism, if we can, I'm just going to finish off this bit. If we compare self-criticism is more about punishment, do this, be active, change this, with the outcome that actually makes you, guilty and you want to run away or you want to fight, depending on your style of dealing with criticism. So it has the opposite outcome to what the inner critic wants, really. So you can see here that it's not very beneficial. But with self-acceptance, what happens is that it actually it's more encouraging, it's more motivating, because if you see that, okay, I've made a fool of myself in that situation. I feel the anxiety, I feel the embarrassment, but I'm not sinking in. I accept it. Okay, that's how I feel. That's what happened. Let it be. But I have wider options. I have more options than this. I can be more. I can, next time when I'm in the same situation, I'm not going to really act that way, because I know what provoked me. I know why I acted in this particular way. And now that I'm able to hold my embarrassment, for example, or insecurity without pushing in the way, without destroying it, without compensating, I'm literally having more freedom. I have more agency to act, more autonomy to act, because I'm not a slave to this particular feeling or emotion. But it comes down to all this idea of mindfulness, meta-awareness, like I was talking in previous videos. So self-acceptance has this potential to motivate ourselves, to broaden our perspective, to open ourselves up to new experiences, to new possibilities, to new behaviors, right? And obviously it expands our personality. So we are not just a fool, we are not just a weirdo, whatever you want to call yourself. We are not just the insecure person. We might be this, we might be all that within specific situation, but we are not just this. We are way more complex than this little bits and pieces of our personality. It's all about expansion, right? So that kind of leads us to this last part I wanted to talk about. There is a very interesting theory. It's called paradoxical theory of change. It's mostly used within Gestalt therapy, and it's kind of tried and tested method. So basically what happens is that if you want to change something within yourself, such as the habit or behavior, you need to be fully engaged with it. You need to fully accept what you are. So for example, you have a bad habit. Let's say you smoke. You want to quit smoking. I guarantee you that's why most people fail. What they're trying to do is they try to quit smoking, right? They try to get a replacement, some nicotine replacement. And that's why they fail, because they fight with themselves. They struggle against their drives. They struggle against themselves, their whole organism. But actually to quit smoking, for example, it's just a random example. But to quit smoking, you need to be fully invested into the act of smoking. So you need to be fully present, you need to be fully mindful of every time you go out for a cigarette, for example, you need to be fully present with that experience. And after a while, you're gonna start noticing that it's not actually making you feel that great. So you notice all these situations. The same with, for example, social anxiety, to use a completely different example. Within this theory, what happens is that let's say that you go blank when you're in a group of people, right? You struggle to come up with things to say. What happens is usually with people with social anxiety is that we are struggling against ourselves. We're fighting. We are in this conflict. Like, go on, I have to think about something to say, right? So we are really, we create this pull. We create this resistance. We're going completely against our impulses, against ourselves, and we create a split. So with the zone, we push away parts of ourselves. But the moment when you embrace all that you are, when you embrace your social anxiety, when you say to yourself, okay, I'm having a social anxiety, and okay, I'm gonna go to meet this group of people, and I'm not gonna speak because I have a social anxiety. Just kind of sink into this, embrace this whole behavior, whole personality, whole habit that you are, and start paying attention, start being mindful in the present moment, right? but not just mindful of yourself, because there's way more to life than yourself, but everything. So it's a whole context, whole situation. So basically what happens is that with this theory of change is that you combine it with self-acceptance, obviously, as I've described. You allow this natural drive we all have for self-actualization, for self-preservation, for doing things that are right. You allow it to come up to the surface, right? You start listening to yourself, right? You have lots of wisdom. We all have lots of wisdom coming from, psychoanalysts would say coming from our unconscious, but all it is just our whole organism, the totality of our being, our own, the whole self. If we don't accept ourselves, if we push away different parts we don't like, we're not listening to anything. We're going against ourselves. We're in conflict. We create resistances. But only when we accept, only when we really start listening, that's where nice things start happening, because then you will see that actually there is a purpose maybe for you to feel in a particular way. Maybe there is a purpose for you to fail in certain situations or make mistakes, because it's part of your, growth or development. And only then, according to this theory of change, only then we can start changing. When you really own yourself, right? You own all this energy, you own all these drives, you own what you are, you embrace it all. Only then as you increase the self-acceptance and self-awareness, you start increasing your autonomy, right? You start increasing your freedom. You have bigger and bigger choice, because you expand this self-concept. You expand this idea of who you are as a person, right? And that opens you up to more and more possibilities. And that's how we grow. So what is self-preservation, would you say? So self-preservation, I would say it depends on the level. So on the very, very basic level, self-preservation is about simply having a drive to survive, right? So be safe, avoid some tremendous dangers, avoid things that are wrong for you, right? That is the very basic of self-preservation. But the thing is that since it's a very biological drive and we are very creative and abstract human beings, we get disconnected from all this natural impulses, natural drives that guide our actions. So we create this imaginary lands, right? I have to avoid anxiety. I have to avoid people. I have to avoid this, right? I don't want to do it. I'm not good enough, right? We're listening to all these abstract ideas we might be having about ourselves, and we lose the connection with the very basic biological drives that actually know already what is right for us. Like, we don't even have to try really hard, because we already know in deep within inside us what is right for us and which direction we need to go in order to grow. And actually, if I remember right, Carl Jung said the same thing. It's called self-regulating psyche. So what happens is that your unconscious, from this perspective, always knows what's right for you. You just need to listen. But as I was saying, with self-criticism, with not having enough self-acceptance, we're pushing away different parts of ourselves. We feed our insecurities and we shy away from lives. So obviously we want to flip it and just trust the process in a sense, right? But obviously it requires lots of reflection, lots of self-awareness, and discarding what belongs to us, what is truly our own feeling, our own true reaction, authentic reaction to a situation, and what is coming, as someone said, was it Abraham, and what is coming from other people, from the society. Because if we follow just the society and other people and all the social norms, we are not listening to ourselves. So again, it's very important to, clarify these differences and know ourselves. Could you comment on the paradoxical nature of the theory of change? Yes, as I was saying, the paradox is that we can't change unless we fully become what we are right now. That is the paradox. So when we do try to change, like I was saying in the example of quitting smoking, when we do try to change, like let's say I want to change my habit, I want to I don't know, become more disciplined, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to create all these habits for myself. I'm going to create a new calendar. But what happen on this fundamental level is I'm going to create a sort of conflict where I'm going to be pushing myself to be something else. Whereas from this paradoxical theory of change perspective, in order to change, you become who you truly are right now. So if you have a bad habit, if you're not disciplined, for example, if you have some feelings that you're not comfortable, if you have some drives that are not very comfortable, just own it. Be it and fully, kind of be fully present with that experience in order to understand it. That will give you self-awareness, and only then you can start changing because you own it. So the energy, the motivation is not getting wasted on something else, but it's actually, you own it, you have freedom, you have the autonomy, right? So you're not struggling with yourself in that situation. And that's where you change. Only when you become who you are right now. Let's read more comments. So that is one way of looking at meditation, cutting out the noise and listening to ourselves. Right. It's about listening. Yeah, self-acceptance fundamentally is about listening. Like, if you want to develop this self-acceptance, you need to listen. You need to be fully with yourself and with every single thing. If you make a mistake, if you embarrass yourself, don't try to look for an excuse of why you embarrassed yourself, or don't try to explain why you made a mistake. You made a mistake, that's it. Own the feeling, own the embarrassment, the anxiety, whatever it is. And stay with it. And then you will see how you're having more and more energy to actually start changing, because you're stepping outside of it. You're not owned by the feeling or by the experience or by your habit, but you start to own it. You start taking responsibility. You have it, right? If, for example, if I'm a liar, thank you, Tremont. For example, if I'm a liar, that is a ridiculous example, but let's say some people are like that. Let's say I lied about something and it starts making me feel very guilty, right? What we start doing is like, we want to start protecting our ego. So like, I lied because I had to, I wanted to protect other person. It was just a white lie. But see what what's happening here. I'm developing all these excuses to avoid the discomfort of doing something not very right. So the alternative here is like, okay, I lied. Maybe I'm not such a bad person, right? Maybe I didn't act so well in that situation. There is a part of me that wants to lie, that maybe is selfish, right? I know it sounds extreme to some people, but you see here like how I'm owning different parts of myself. It doesn't mean I'm 100% a liar or 100% not a nice person, but there is a potential there, and we all have these potentials for many different awful things. But by owning it, by seeing that, okay, within this context, I lied, I wanted to lie. What happens is that in the future, I'm not going to be going around lying to people, right? Because I have some excuses to save other person or to protect someone or to protect myself. The chances are most likely I'm not going to be doing it because I choose to do it within specific context. I had a reason. I wanted to do it in that context, right? Or I might say like, okay, I've done it this one time. There's no excuse. This is what I've done. I wanted to do it, but then I choose not to do it again. So whatever thing allows us to own it, then we have this power to change or to do something different. Thank you, AJ. Telling a joke is lying as well. Is a bad idea then? Well, it's only bad. Can you see self-criticism here? It manifests in your comment. The evaluation already manifests. So it's bad if you tell yourself it's bad, right? So really depends on all these evaluations, which we might or we might not use. But as I'm saying, the more we use these evaluations, the more it prevents us from connecting with these different parts of ourselves, and the more we fuel the inner critic, and the more we move away from self-acceptance. So in a way, just reading some of my notes, right, as I was saying, the increasing autonomy as we owning all this states, but also the last bit I wanted to talk about. So in regards to kind of flow state, oh, that was a joke. Yeah, I don't know, you need to put some indication it's a joke, because I cannot tell. So when we accept different parts of ourselves and we start listening to different drives and different impulses, which is this as I was saying, this theory of change, this paradoxical theory of change, is very fundamental to Gestalt therapy. And if you look at, for example, the videos from Gestalt therapy, it's very weird in the sense, like when you go to Gestalt therapist, they will provoke different parts of you so that you own every single thing that happens to you. If it's shame, if it's anger, if it's drive even to, do something awful, like destroy someone's house, you start owning it. You have to own it all, and only then you can move along. But there's something more to all that. There's something more, and I briefly mentioned about this drive for self-actualization / self-preservation. So doing things that are right for us. And as we increase this ability to listening to ourselves, as we are aware of all these different impulses, so that they stop coming out in situations we don't want it to come out, or that we can stop finally projecting on the other people, and we start listening to all these different drives and impulses, we'll finally start kind of distinguishing between the wrong impulses and the right impulses. So there are impulses that will probably, or drives, however you want to call it, probably drives that want to destroy things, and there will be drives that want to create things, so push you towards growth. And actually some people will say, like, yeah, don't listen to the so-called bad impulses, but in my opinion, I would actually go along and accept even all these bad impulses. Maybe not necessarily actualizing them in real life, like destroying someone's house. Obviously you don't want to face the consequences, but owning them starts telling you something about your life path, something about your perhaps way of living that would be right for you, right? So if you start getting different impulses, like, or drives, like I want to paint something, or I want to go for a walk, but you can't hear any good reasons for doing so, but maybe it keeps repeating. Maybe you have this idea that I was thinking about watching some movie or calling some person, right? There might be a purpose to all that, and it's something that might be pushing you towards growth. So basically it's a little bit like Alan Watts was saying, we need to stop standing on our own way. We need to get out of our own way, because that's when problems start. That's when we start blocking things. But when we are aware, when we are mindful, when we are listening to ourselves, when we are going with the flow, that's how we can start learning more about ourselves, and that's how we can start seeing actually where we are going and why we are going somewhere. Like, maybe, maybe it's not 100% scientific theory, although within psychology community it's kind of confirmed that we all have the self-actualizing tendency, that we want to grow, right? It's the impulse of every single organism on earth, and it goes beyond psychology. It's not just on the mental level, but we all want to expand, we all want to grow, we want to gain status, we want to, get self-esteem, we want to get relationships, we want this, we want to expand, and we want to enjoy life. And it's a very basic human need. But how can we do it if our mind is removed from our bodies, right? And we can't listen to the impulses, we can't listen to these drives that will guide us towards the right actions. So it is a long journey, but it's totally worth it. It's totally worth it, because obviously that journey will lead you more towards freedom, towards more autonomy, as I was saying, right? So obviously that's better than living in a prison of guilt or of self-criticism or sadness. So it takes a little bit of self-trust to develop all this self-acceptance, but again, the rewards are really great, I think. It's totally worth it. Okay, so I'll be wrapping up. If you have any comments, any questions, I'm still happy to answer some. And just as a quick reminder, next time, if you don't want to lose or miss my live stream, there is a notification option when you subscribe to my channel, and when I publish the link to the live stream itself, there is an option for getting a notification. And lastly, of course, I still have a few places left for my group coaching sessions. So this will be theme-based. I haven't decided on themes yet. That's why I have the sign-up form, so you can contribute. You can tell me exactly what you want to work on, what sort of goals, what sort of things you want to achieve. And then I'll be able to develop timetables for each coaching group. There might be only one, there might be a couple different ones. I still have some places left. So if you want to choose this more affordable option for coaching, you want to work on some goals, you want to improve something within yourself or within your life, then you are welcome to sign up. And yeah, as I was saying, there's an option to indicate the preferred time, so when it works best for you and what sort of thing you want to work on. So by collecting all these responses, I will be able to develop a schedule and a theme of a group and a goal, possible outcomes for everyone that is convenient for everyone. So there is a link, and I will be putting a link in the description. I forgot to do it because of all this chaos before the live stream. But if you just go on my website, go to the coaching page, and then there will be an option for group coaching. All right, it's meaningful, like art, winning the battles against one's demons, and great peace, like epic. It kind of is. In a way, it is like a battle. At least from my perspective, it's a battle, but the opposite of the battle. So you are fighting against fighting in a sense. So you are like retreating from battle. So when we are in a battle, when we are fighting with ourselves, when there are conflicts, that's where there is resistance and we don't have energy and we are being pulled into different directions, right? So what we want the opposite state. We want peace, we want acceptance, we want going with the flow and with this drive that pushes us towards growth and knows what's best for us, right? There is a reason why, for example, we develop anxiety, or there is a reason why we feel fear, right? Our organism knows exactly what is right for us. We just need to listen, to live with oneself, to be civil with oneself, learning how all the parts and pieces of your machine, all that is what you are, fit and work together. Yeah. Could give my question a shot if you have enough time. Yeah, of course. Let me see, Max. Recently I was thinking about atonement a bit, and I wonder how is there a level of forgiving to oneself in the act of accepting? Yeah, forgiveness is a big one, but weight as being wrong, but you want to repair something, you want to fix it. To forgive yourself, you need to understand yourself, why you did it in the first place. Like, you can't just brush it off. You can't just say to yourself like, okay, I accept it, that's it, or I forgive myself. But to truly forgive yourself, it's the same like forgiving other people. To forgive other people, or to forgive yourself, you need to first understand what happened, why something happened, why did you act that way, or why someone acted that way, right? And was there an alternative? Was there really an alternative? Because sometimes based on our current capabilities or current circumstances, we are doing the best we can with what we have in these circumstances. So maybe sometimes, even if it's something terrible, even if it's something bad, maybe it's the best that we could have done in that situation. But to reach this conclusion, you really need to understand what truly happened and understand why you kind of why you acted that way, right? What really happened, and what did you gain from acting that way, and was there an alternative way to gain what you gained? So how do you forgive others? Attend having into things, right? So yeah, exactly, that's what I was saying. So it's the same like forgiving to yourself, you forgive others. So you need to, you're welcome, Max. So you need to understand why that person acted in that particular way, and maybe that they acted because that's all that was available to them at that moment, and they didn't know any better. We are really complex creatures. Like, it's not that, again, it's not that simple. It's not all black and white, right? And it's a constant, in a way, as you develop this self-awareness, as you increase with this development of self-awareness, you kind of transcend your understanding over and over and over again. So you improve, you learn, you transcend it, you see more, you broaden your perspective, and you open yourself up to more and more interpretations of your experience. What professional title do you prefer, Joanna? Joanna is fine. I mean, I'm still in the process of doing my master's. I have another year left. Started my research a little bit, but I have some other assignments. So I don't know, maybe Joanna is fine. I think Joanna is fine. I'm not so much into all these titles and all this accreditation. Johnny. Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you so much for joining me again today. If you're interested in coaching, I have some availability. Don't forget about the group coaching, so you can get more from this live streams, where obviously you can get more attention to people, because you know there are around 20 to 30 people in each live stream, and I really struggle to read all the comments and split my attention into myriad different topics. But with the group coaching, I'm going to have only 5 people per group. So that's very easy to build really good discussions and actually accomplish something and build some goals. Thank you very much for joining today, guys. And I'll hope to see you next Saturday, same time, on the next live stream. Take care of yourself. Bye.